Joining me now for the latest on how Canada has been supporting Ukraine, as well as for the latest on the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his visit to Canada, is a panel of parliamentarians. Let's bring in Francesco Sorbara. He's a Liberal MP for the Ontario riding of Vaughan Woodbridge. Heather McPherson is the NDP MP for the riding of Edmonton Strathcona, and that party's foreign affairs critic. Garnett Genuis is a Conservative MP for Forward Park, Fort Saskatchewan in the province of Alberta. Hello to the three of you. Thanks for joining me. Francesco, I'll start out with you. The German Chancellor is here in Canada now. At the Prime Minister's press conference today, one of the topics that was discussed was energy policy. The Prime Minister made a comment as it relates to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. He said he believes it's time for the world to accelerate, ending sort of its reliance on oil and gas, specifically as it relates to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Why is that a priority of your government?
Well, thank you, Wyatt, for the question, and thank you for the invitation tonight. It's great to be here with Garnett and Heather. Look, first of all, we've made it a priority in our government to undertake, a transition or to lower greenhouse gas emissions, which obviously are the culprit behind climate change, and we know the devastating impact on climate change, not only here in Canada but across the world, and particularly in many developing countries. We've seen the dependence of Europe on Russian energy, specifically gas, more so than anything, and what that has resulted in. So obviously lessening the dependence on Russian energy is a priority for all European countries and for Canada to help in that. And then secondly, the transition to lower greenhouse gas emissions via alternative energy sources is very much of importance. But I will also add that, look, Europe is going to need gas and other sources of energy for many years to come. And you've seen many European countries sign agreements with other countries to diversify their sources of energy. And that's going to be a part of it. And for Canada, LNG exports and gas shipments are going to be a key part of it for years to come. But we also must reduce the reliance of Russia and also alternative energy sources. That's what I think the Prime Minister was getting at. We must accelerate the transition, but we also need to understand that countries in Europe and their citizenry need to heat their homes in the wintertime, need to feed their families, and their businesses need to operate. And that's got to be a part of the equation.
Francesco, just before I go to Garnett, I want to ask you about something that has been heavily brought up that took place in mid-July. The government made the decision to return turbines that were used in a pipeline in order to carry natural gas from Russia to Germany. That was criticized by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. What do you say to people who, based off of that, criticize your government's role and how they've supported Ukraine?
Obviously, that decision was made with much study and with much diligence. I believe it was the right decision. I've commented on that and stated so forth. The Germans, the Americans, our European allies have all supported us with that decision. Obviously, we don't want to do anything that aids the Russians. We don't want to do anything that aids the Russian propaganda. I believe that if we had not returned the turbines, that would have fed the Russian propaganda and disinformation that happens from that. We work closely with our German allies. We've been there a stalwart with our Ukrainian allies and with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. We will continue to be so. It's a tough decision, but it was the right decision to undertake, and we move forward from there.
Garnett, on the turbine again that would carry the flow of gas between Russia and Germany, Francesco just said he believes his government made the right decision. Did it?
Wyatt, at the time, I said this was a slap in the face to the Ukrainian people in their darkest hour, and I stand by that completely. Conservatives oppose this decision. We would not have made this decision, and in fact, we would have pursued a different energy policy for the last 7 years that would have positioned Canada to export more of our domestically produced energy resources and play a greater role contributing to energy security. The elephant in the room here for the Chancellor's visit is that Germany and Canada have both in recent years pursued energy policies that have been a significant failure. Germany has been over reliant on Russian gas, despite the fact that Ukraine was first invaded by Russia back in 2014. It's not as if Russian aggression against Ukraine is a surprise, given that it's been an ongoing reality. And yet Germany has not pursued alternative sources of energy prior to that. The Canadian failure has been, we should have recognized much earlier that as a country that has immense wealth in natural resources, we could be supplying the democratic free world with energy resources. And instead of focusing on supplying our allies with Canadian energy, we are abrogating our own sanctions to send back a turbine to facilitate the Russian export of energy to Germany. It doesn't make any sense. Germany should be pursuing alternatives. They should be looking at not decommissioning their remaining nuclear plants. I believe Germany has options. I believe Canada could be part of the solution. But the Liberal government's war on Canadian fossil fuels is simply forcing other countries into the arms of Russia. It's tragic to see. We should be creating jobs here in the Canadian energy sector and supporting Ukraine at the same time by offering our allies in Europe an alternative. Francesco says that our allies support this decision. I think Canada should stand with our ally Ukraine, that is the front line of this fight. We shouldn't be going around collecting supportive quotes from other countries. We should be focusing on giving Ukraine exactly what it needs to defeat the Russians. And Ukraine, like the Conservatives, wants to see the government send no more turbines back to Gazprom.
And Garnett, point taken, but just to follow up with you on that, I mean, Francesco says his government has, done the work to study the decision. The Prime Minister has previously came out. He has said that this was a difficult decision. There's also a lot of concerns that doing this was, again, a necessary decision, given the need to support Germany and other European allies. And many people are saying that there has been, threatened natural gas shortages, etc. Is that true to any extent? Does that have any truth in it?
No. So a few things about those specific points. So despite the turbine being sent back, the Russians haven't taken back the turbine. They're still supplying only 20% of the capacity of Nord Stream 1, and they're planning on taking it offline for unscheduled maintenance later on. This was a test. The Russians were testing our resolve. They were testing to see if they could exert enough pressure to get us to break our sanctions. They were successful in getting us to break our sanctions, and they're not increasing the supply of energy to Germany as a result. They're simply exerting more pressure. So it hasn't solved the problem it was supposed to solve. But the other thing, why, just to really underline, is the government says this is complex. They're embarrassed of the decision. They've offered three separate explanations of this. First, they said it was about getting Germany the energy it needed. Then they said it was about calling Putin's bluff. But then in recent court documents, they said it's actually about jobs. It's about wanting to protect opportunity for the Siemens facility that's very close to Melanie Jolie's own riding. So we've got multiple different explanations, and the government doesn't want to discuss this at committee. The Foreign Affairs Committee agreed to have hearings on this, and then the partisan Liberal chair, Ali El-Sassi, has just been refusing to schedule meetings. We had a meeting that was supposed to happen last week that was canceled. We had one very short meeting in which we only heard from the Ukrainian Canadian Congress for half an hour. The Liberals don't want to talk about this. They're throwing out multiple different explanations, and they're canceling committee meetings on it. That shows, frankly, that they have something to hide, and they are rightly embarrassed about their decision. I think they should do the right thing and rescind their decision.
Heather, I want to come to you really quickly, and I'll have a few questions for you in a minute. But Francesco, Garnett just said that it shows that your government is embarrassed by this decision. Is that true? I mean, what is your, reaction to your remarks from your colleague, Garnett Genuis?
Obviously, I think we need to take a step back and say, first off, as parliamentarians, as Canadians, we are steadfast in our support, standing shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainian people, and in full support, of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and we will remain there. We have to remember that Canadian soldiers for many years have been training thousands of Ukrainian soldiers to fight today against the incredible unjustified Russian invasion in Ukraine. And we, recently announced that we were sending soldiers over to, I believe it is United Kingdom, to continue to help training those brave Canadian soldiers that are fighting against the Russians, as we speak, as we put on this thing. So I don't want to get into the partisanship and start saying embarrassing or this or that. What I'm going to say is our government is doing everything we can Yes, to support the Ukrainian people, aid Ukraine as best as we can with our allies. Yes, tough decisions have been made with regards to the turbine. It was the right decision to make. At the end of the day, we will continue to be with Ukraine and with the Ukrainian people as they continue this fight, and to make sure their children grow up with the freedom that our children have here in Canada.
But you're just ignoring the question, Francesco. Like, why don't you want the Foreign Affairs Committee to meet then? Why are you canceling meetings?
You know,
I'm just going to bring in Heather.
yeah, I'd like to have Heather. I want to hear from Heather, and not
Great.
to definitely let's hear from MP McPherson. I would like to, and good evening, Heather.
Heather, just on the piece of that Francesco has mentioned, the Prime Minister has mentioned it before as well, that Russia is trying to, weaponize energy, etc. Is that true? And I mean, how can, I guess, the world condemn any sort of attacks like that from Russia, etc.?
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, Wyatt. I listened to my two colleagues speak this evening, and both of them had made really important points. But I will say that I was very disappointed that we broke our sanction regime, that Canada broke that sanction regime, and the reason for me is that the first thing that popped into my mind is that when someone tells you that they are a liar, when they lie at every turn, when they have over and over and over again weaponized energy, weaponized food, weaponized all these things, why on earth would we have trusted that Putin would actually provide energy to Germany? We have seen him weaponize these things time and time again. So absolutely, I agree with my colleague from the Liberal Party that it would have been a very difficult decision. Germany is an ally of ours. We want to make sure that the German people have the natural gas, the fuel, the resources they need to get through this winter. It is of course, like Garnett mentioned, a very difficult thing that the German economy is so dependent on Russian energy. That said, that is the reality. I think we can all be very, very proud of Germany. They've done an awful lot over the very short term to get off Russian energy. They are trying to diversify. They won't be able to do it fast enough. So there is that problem. The issue for me was, why on earth would we have thought that this would be the solution? And now knowing that this isn't the solution, knowing very clearly that Putin is not going to send natural gas to Germany, that this has been weaponized, why on earth have we not canceled the waiver? The waiver is for 6 turbines, not for 1. Now, we've sent 1 back. We've proven the point. We've made it very clear that Putin has no intention of following through on his side of the bargain. So why have we not canceled that waiver? Why have we not said, we're done? I don't understand that. I haven't been able to get an answer from Minister Wilkinson or Minister Joly on why that is the case. And it is disappointing. And I have to agree with my colleague from the Conservative Party that there has been this delay and deferral of our Foreign Affairs Committee. So we actually can't get those answers.
Francesco, regardless of, whether or not and which side of the argument you stand on, obviously everyone here seems to be in agreement that supporting Ukraine is important, etc.
Mm-hmm.
How will the government of Canada move forward with supporting Ukraine, putting, I guess, this and the situation with the turbine behind, and just move forward and show that Ukraine is a valued partner?
Well, I think we demonstrate that on a daily basis, Wyatt, in terms of supporting Ukraine and the Ukrainian people and the soldiers in Ukraine, and we'll continue to do so. I think with regards to the Foreign Affairs Committee, obviously I can't speak for the chair of the committee, my good friend Ali Assasi, and when meetings will take place and when meetings are not. If I remember the motion correctly, there is a motion there to study the decision to call the pertinent ministers, and I believe Minister Joly was that committee. I think Minister Wilkinson was also a committee, and the further witnesses would be called. So when they are scheduled, obviously the committee, it's a master of its own domain. We'll make that determination there. I've subbed in on the committee, but I don't sit on it, so I don't know all the machinations of what's going on. But I know I've sat on committees for the last 7 years and been in many heated discussions with members of Parliament, many constructive heated discussions, I would say. And I would say this is one of them. I think, I don't disagree with my colleagues in asking questions on the decision, making sure that everyone has the answers that they're satisfied with, and continue to ask those questions if you're not satisfied. That's definitely the role of not even just an opposition party, but in the time we're in, making sure we have the answers we need to understand that the decisions were made, and very critical and crucial decisions, of course, in this context.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that point, if that's okay, Wyatt. I mean, Francesco said he doesn't know what's going on exactly with the scheduling of the committee. I think the point that Heather and I were making is that we don't know what's going on either, because on July 15th, the committee, which is supposed to be master of its domain, agreed to do a study on this issue. We had hearings on one day, August the 4th, in which we had very limited time with witnesses. We had half an hour for the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, which is unheard of, that you would call a witness for only half an hour. We had two ministers at once. Normally, you have ministers sit separately, sometimes for 2 hours, sometimes for one. Well, we had two ministers together for only an hour and a half, and then we had all three ambassadors, and that was it. That's all we've had in terms of hearings, and we've been asking since August the 4th. When's the next meeting going to be? This is an urgent issue. This is a war going on. When is the Foreign Affairs Committee going to meet as it was directed to? And the chair of the committee, very partisan, and I suspect the Prime Minister's office just does not want these hearings to take place. And this is the situation we're in. The government says they're proud of this decision, but they offer different contradictory explanations for this decision. The Ukrainian government is dead set against it, and the chair of the committee is just steadfastly refusing to let the committee get on with its work.
Okay, and then just Garnett, I just want to, I mean, you've talked a lot about how you're unhappy with the fact that a lot of the ministers haven't given as much time as you would have liked to the committee. I mean, what can the ministers do? Obviously, you would like them to come to the committee for longer lengths of time, but beyond that, what can ministers do? I mean, from my personal experience, the ministers have came on my program, they've came on other programs, they've explained their decisions. What would you like to see?
Well, I mean, I would like to see the ministers cancel the sanctions waiver. I mean, that's the core of this issue. That I think this is a serious betrayal of Ukraine. That you know, I don't dispute that there have been some good things done in terms of support offered, but this is an absolutely existential issue for Ukraine, but also for the cause of freedom in the world, and we need to be there 100%, which means supplying more weapons to Ukraine, which means yes, proceeding with the training mission, which is a good idea and something we support, and it means not giving Russia any quarter when it comes to exemptions to sanctions. The committee is an important forum for discussing those issues and putting pressure on the government to do the right thing. And I think in this case, the opposition parties are pretty united in wanting to put that pressure on the government. And yet we have a Liberal chair that's not allowing the committee to meet.
Okay, I just want to bring in Heather and Francesco one last time before we conclude. Heather, just your final thoughts.
Well, you know, I think one of the things that I want to make very, very clear is that all parliamentarians, or I certainly hope all parliamentarians, are aware that the main goal here is to get help for Ukraine, is to make sure that we are all standing with Ukraine. You know, I do have to laugh a little bit. I mean, you know, Garnett is talking about his challenges with committee, but he did filibuster committee all fall, all spring. So there has been some other challenges.
We tried to adjourn that debate, Heather, and you voted against it.
So there is some other challenges within that, but I do want people to understand that this is the goal, and the goal can involve things like making sure we are getting green energy resources like green hydrogen to Germany, that there is a plan, there is a medium-term plan. Obviously, that we're not in a place where we have a short-term plan for that, but a medium-term plan. You know, there are things that we can do to help by opening the embassy. You know, we announced that in May. It's still not, that embassy is still not open. Perhaps we can do some work with protecting our you know, national employees that are working in that embassy. There's lots that Canada is doing that I'm really proud of. I think we can do more. I think we can do it faster. I think we need to be responding more urgently in our support for Ukraine. I think that would be the thing. But certainly all parliamentarians are trying to find ways to support Ukraine, and we are working together. I think Canadians need to see that.
Francesco, just before we conclude, obviously this is a very insightful conversation and we could continue to have it for hours, I'm sure. But I just, like Garnett mentioned that he would have liked to see the ministers at committee longer. Heather mentioned that she believes the Conservatives have been filibustering, etc. How do you take the more partisan politics out of this?
You know, why that's, look, as an MP here in the city of Vaughan, and been elected 3 times by my constituents, and having the pleasure and honor to serve them, you know, I will say this: I try to work with all sides of the aisle, and be courteous and respectful as much as I can. and work with that. I think each MP it kind of demonstrates that to their best ability. I'm not there personally to be partisan in Parliament. I'm there to do my job and hopefully push the government agenda forward. Yes, and to agree with it when I agree with it, and to also voice my opinion to my colleagues when I don't on my side, and also voice my opinion in caucus. We're there to do the work that Canadians sent us to do. And if you're on the government side, you have a job, and if you're on opposition, it's to hold the government to the feet to the fire. And I respect significantly Garnett's work on committee, Garnett's work in the House, and I have the same high degree as respect for Heather and her team in the House and both on committees. We have a job to do. Yes, it can get into the weeds and sometimes, but at the end of the day, I think all 338 parliamentarians are there for the right reasons, and a lot of them put aside partisanship. The jabs have to be taken, and we got to get our policies and our points of view across. But even on Ukraine, look, we are working extremely well with all parties are working extremely well together on this front. There's no disunity on this and stuff. But I just not to take too much time, but I very much understand Garnett's view and Heather's view to have the ministers come back or more time. I would want the same, and obviously the ministers' schedules are of such. They're available when they're available, and they have their responsibilities. But committees are, they're a very important instrument in Parliament. And we know that, and I have a great deal of respect for them, having served on many of them for the last couple of years, and they need to do the work. And a good parliamentarian will ask tough questions on whichever side of the aisle they're on.
Okay, Francesco Sorbara, Garnett
Well
Genuis,
said.
and Heather McPherson. Thanks so much to the three of you for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you
Night,
for the
everyone.
opportunity.